Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started. We have, this is the Community Services Committee for Tuesday, June 24th, 2025. We acknowledge that Ottawa is located on unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, whose culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. We have no regrets, and I'll ask the committee coordinator to do the roll call.
Councillor Brockington.
Here.
Councillor Brown.
Here.
Councillor Carr.
Here.
Councillor Hill.
Present.
Councillor Kavanagh.
Present.
Councillor King.
Here.
Councillor Lowe.
Present.
Conseillère Plante.
Hello.
Councillor Troster.
Here.
Vice Chair Bradley.
Here.
Chair Dudas.
Ici.
You have quorum, Chair.
Merci beaucoup. We have no declarations of interest and seeing none. Confirmation of minutes from Tuesday, May 27th, 2025. Are these minutes carried? Carried. 4.1, transition of Centre Éducatif Pinocchio to a high needs area. We do have a motion on this item. We don't have any delegations. So I will ask Councillor Plante to read in her motion.
Thank you so much. I'm just, oh, it's being put on the screen. I'll do that instead. Whereas a municipal child care center review was completed and presented to City Council June 2021 as a result of child care in early years sector undergoing a significant period of transformation, modernization, and growth. And whereas having access to French language child care and early years services is important to Francophone families in Ottawa, these services develop a sense of belonging, foster community, vitality, preserving the language, and encourage attendance in French language schools. And I apologize for the noise in the background. There's construction. Whereas the review found that services at 111 Sussex Drive, located between Lowertown and New Edinburgh, did not meet Council's mandate for municipally operated childcare. This finding is mostly attributable to not serving families who face barriers, and systemic challenges. And whereas parents and families in Lowertown are very concerned about the loss of a city-run Francophone childcare in the area, whereas the current report recommendation is to reaffirm the city's 2021 commitment to direct staff to seamlessly transition these critical Francophone spaces, minimize impacts to families, work with the Centre Éducatif Pinocchio landlord and not-for-profit childcare provider to maintain dedicated Francophone spaces, and prioritize these spaces within directed growth strategies to ensure the spaces can remain within the CWE-LCC system, offering reduced fees for families. And whereas Children's Services is guided by youth-approved childcare and early years service system plan and provincial priorities, applying for an equity inclusion lens and an evidence-based approach to identify priority populations. Please scroll. Thank you. Whereas Canada early-wide learning and child care funded spaces between 2023 and 2026, and whereas this approach is intended to ensure that new childcare spaces are prioritized for families and communities facing systemic barriers and lower access to services as a result of limited new growth spaces within the CWE-LCC system. And whereas aligning the location of Francophone childcare services from 111 Sussex Drive in an area in Lowertown or Sandy Hill would help improve early childhood development outcomes for families facing systemic barriers and would better align with to achieving the outcomes included in the council-approved childcare and early years service system plan. And whereas many existing community childcare service providers in Lowertown and Sandy Hill are experiencing viability concerns with a risk of lower access for a neighborhood Lowertown that has high neighborhood vulnerability score, indicating negative early childhood development outcomes, and neighborhood Sandy Hill that is below provincial access targets as outlined within the childcare and early years service system plan 2025-2029. And whereas the City of Ottawa used to also municipally operate on location Lowertown, and increasingly municipally operated services around this area would help mitigate the associated service and delivery risk for this community and ensure access to culturally relevant Francophone services. Therefore, be it resolved that recommendation 5 of the report be deleted and replaced with the following: that the Community Service Committee recommend that Council 5 direct staff to develop a business case and capital funding plan to explore the feasibility of maintaining the continuity of municipally operated French language childcare services within Lowertown or Sandy Hill. 6, direct staff to report back to CSC the findings of the business case no later than Q1 2027 with next steps and recommendations for consideration as part of the Plan 1010 Somerset Transition Plan to help minimize impacts for families. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor, did you want to briefly speak to the motion?
Yeah, so first I want to thank Councillor Troster. We had a really good chat about this situation when we both learned about it, and we both agree that we need to be increasing childcare spaces across the city, not sort of just moving them around. There's a need for childcare. There's a dire need for childcare, especially downtown. And I also want to thank staff because we have been working with the community since 2023, since we learned about the potential move of Pinocchio. And, there were some concerns around the data that was being presented. There were concerns about the location, sort of prioritizing people because the current location is at the Global Affairs Building and not prioritizing families in Lowertown. So a lot of people had their hand in this pie, and I think we have a good result. And I also want to thank you, Chair, because I know you assisted in that meeting with us to come to this conclusion. So everybody wants to see cute little faces in their neighborhood and childcare spaces. And this, I think, achieves those goals. So you get a daycare, you get a daycare, you get a daycare, Oprah style. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Blunt. We do have staff here to answer any questions, but before we move to that, staff, are you supportive of the motion?
Chair, yes, we are supportive of the motion.
Wonderful, thank you. Councillor Troster, you have a question.
Yeah, thanks. It's actually more of a comment because we're not having a presentation today, but I just wanted to explain what's going on for people who may not understand it based on all the convoluted motions. So as you may know, we have a big development going in at 1010 Somerset in Little Italy in my neighborhood, along with a brand new French elementary school. And this is a huge opportunity to have a French language daycare that meets the needs of the community. And right now, according to the city survey, West Centertown has the highest need and no French daycare access. So it's a good thing to be expanding daycare in my neighborhood, but I didn't want that to happen at the expense of Lowertown, which is a traditionally Francophone neighborhood. I've talked about this a lot before. This is supposed to be a universal program, but because we're only meeting 70% of the need, there ends up being competition for spots. But we want to be creating more spots. We don't want to just be porting them from one neighborhood to another. And this original report is based on a motion from 2021 when the system was entirely different and before Councillor Plant and I were elected. So when I saw what was about to come to committee, I was like, wait, Councillor Plant, let's talk about this. Let's see how we can increase availability. So now instead of just moving the spots to West Centertown, they're going to look for another space for the existing spots in Lowertown into an area that's actually low income and that meets the needs. So it's a win-win for everyone. I'm very excited about the development, and I know the families in my ward who have been having to drive or bus their kids to other locations to get French language education are finally going to have the opportunity to do so in their own neighborhood. So thank you so much. I want to thank staff and thank Chair Judas and Councillor Plant because we worked really hard on this together to get a plan that we could all be happy with. And I want to reassure the parents at Pinocchio Daycare that those spots are not going to leave your neighborhood. And actually, it might end up being even more of a net game if Pinocchio chooses to stay where it is and we move the city spots to yet another location. But we obviously need way more childcare than we have right now. Every parent knows that. So thanks to everyone who worked on this. It's a good news story.
Thank you, Councillor Troster. Councillor Plant.
Yeah, I just sort of wanted to piggyback on those comments because I think, there's often this idea, especially for French language services, that you can just sort of, hire a third party or get a bilingual this or get a bilingual that. And if any of you have ever read the Montfort decision from 2001 that saved the hospital, one of the things the judge stressed in his decision is that in order to ensure that Francophone services are provided high quality Francophone services, you have to ensure that it's the government that is providing them. In this case, they're referring to hospitals, and it's now, since that's really solid case law that's been expanded to like schools and long-term care, et cetera. So I'm really happy that Jason was open to looking to another place in Lowertown, because I think we can all agree, especially with the loss of the Beau Soleil daycare in 2016, we don't want to be losing any more government provided services. And we do have some great third-party providers, Le Cap, Aladdin, et cetera, but it's always nice when the city is investing in French services, which they are here. So thanks to everyone for this good news ending. Merci beaucoup.
Wonderful. Seeing no further questions, I just wanted to add my thanks to staff. I know you've been working very hard at this and working with the councillor for the ward, as well as Councillor Troster and myself, to come to some kind of solution. So thank you. And the work is not done. You have to continue. We have the motion before us. Is the motion carried? All right. And the report as amended? Carried. Great, thank you. We're moving to 4.2, 2025 update to local rules under the Housing Services Act 2021 or 2011. We do have staff here. We don't have a presentation, nor do we have any motions. Do people have questions for staff? Okay, we have a question for staff, so if staff can come get settled.
Okay, just a few technical questions. Thank you so much.
Jumped in, I was going to introduce you.
Oh, so sorry.
Councillor Troster.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question about the interpretation of household sizes in the text. If a household is a couple of two people and they're a couple and they qualify for a one-bedroom unit, they can also apply for bachelor units, correct? For them to share together, or does it have to be a one-bedroom for a couple? I mean, a bachelor would be very small for two people, but you know.
Yeah, they can also apply for a bachelor's through your chair.
Okay, so if they're a couple and they're looking for RGI housing and they have no children, they can apply for a smaller place if they think they can function there.
That is correct.
Okay. I just have a question. This is very technical. Rule 24 and Rule 8.4, how they coexist. So Rule 24 says if a household does not accept the first valid RGI housing offer, they will lose their eligibility to remain on the list. And then Rule 8.4 says that overhoused individuals may refuse offers to transfer to appropriately sized units during the first year of being overhoused. However, a valid offer that is received and refused in the second year or later will result in the loss of RGI assistance. So they don't lose their eligibility in the first year. They have a year to find a place and they could get multiple offers in that year. Is that correct?
Through your chair, yes, that's correct. So they would have multiple instances where they don't immediately lose that offer. Essentially, they remain on an eligibility list.
Okay. And just to be clear, it used to be 3 offers that people could get, and now it's 1. Is that provincially mandated?
Through your chair, yes, that is. That was a change in the act, I believe, in 2017.
I mean, I know our numbers are overwhelming, but it is incredibly undignified for people to have so little choice in where they live. So again, that's not a decision that we made, but you know, I can imagine if you're offered a place that's nowhere near your family, not in your neighborhood, not a place where you want to live, to have to say no and then be kicked off the list. So can you then rejoin the list? Or are you off forever if you reject?
Through your chair, yes, you can rejoin the list. You do get removed from the list if you deny an eligible offer. You essentially go to the bottom of the list. You rejoin the eligibility list, whether you're on priority or the chronological list.
I just think this speaks to the lack of dignity afforded to people living in poverty. So few choices that are made for them, and not the opportunity to have any say where they live. And I know that the situation is dire and that the centralized waiting list for RGA housing is higher than it's ever been, but I did just want to state that I think that's really a shame, and that's not a positive change made by the province, although I understand from a system management perspective it might be easier, but it just makes me sad to see that people can lose their eligibility so quickly if they're offered housing that isn't suitable to them. But anyway, thank you for your work on this.
If I may make a comment on that, Chair, really there's drawbacks, but I do want to flag that it's important we note that people in these situations many times do have access to a housing benefit, which is what we really want to occur, especially for people in shelter. People on low income usually do have access to these housing benefits, which are portable. We really do want folks using those to minimize shelter lake time. So although, yes, I would agree having more choice is better, there is other options and programs that we offer that do provide more choice.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Carr.
Thank you very much. Just in light of Councillor Troster's question, I just have a follow-up question. In the case that you're given, we're only going to they only have one choice. In the case that the person who's waiting housing has had, if there's a reason why they shouldn't be located in the community, for example, if there's been an issue of domestic violence or a threat to the person, is that taken into consideration at all?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it is. So there are prescribed reasons in which they can deny a valid offer.
Okay, thanks. That's comforting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. And just a follow-on question from my colleagues. The report mentions the waiting list may be inflated due to service delivery issues and newcomer inflow. I'm just wondering when will the centralized waiting list review be complete, and how might this affect the changes proposed?
Thank you, Chair. So the review is currently undergoing. Really, we're still in a paper-based system for the most part. So we've just switched over to our electronic system. So we're trying to get everything digitized. We do have a team of city staff working closely with the registry to update this list and get a little bit more accurate reflection of the picture and reduce those wait times in terms of the processing periods. We do expect we'll have significant progress by the fall.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Cavanagh.
Thank you. This may or may not be directly related, but in terms of supportive housing, will that be on the same list, or is that treated separately as we look for to put people into supportive housing?
Thank you, Chair. Supportive housing is related. So within the registry, you're able to apply specifically for supportive housing buildings. We also, as the city internally for our funded city buildings, maintain an internal list that is more focused on people experiencing homelessness, but the registry also provides that as an option when you do your application.
Okay, but usually there's some kind of assessment beforehand. People don't put themselves on it, but they're assessed.
Through you, Chair, yes, through city housing programs where we are funding the supportive housing, there is an assessment. So you land at one of 3 levels, and then we would match you with a building that provides that level of service.
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no further questions, is this item carried? Great. Thank you very much. Item 5.1 is status update, Community Services Committee inquiries and motions for the period ending June 6th, 2024. Is this item received? Received. We have no in-camera items. We do have one IPD, and I believe Vice Chair Bradley has a motion to lift it onto the agenda. This is the one regarding City of Ottawa and Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation Civic Cultural Protocol and Implementation Plan. Vice Chair, would you read your motion in, please?
Sure. Eric, are you able to put it up on the screen? Thank you. So be it resolved that the Community Services Committee allow discussion of this item for consideration by committee at today's meeting pursuant to subsection 89.4 of the procedure bylaw, being bylaw number 2022-410, to allow for an update on the matter.
Is this item carried? Carried. Wonderful. Vice Chair?
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I really just have some brief comments and a question to staff. First, I want to acknowledge the ongoing work from staff on this file. It's complex and meaningful work, and I appreciate the efforts that have gone into advancing the implementation plan. As you know, this council, I was assigned to the liaison to this plan, and it's been an honor to take part in the many impactful conversations with host nation leadership. Hearing their lived experiences and stories have been monumental in helping me understand the importance of the city's role in opportunities for reconciliation and the need for action and change. And I want to thank my colleagues, Councillor Kavanagh, Councillor Plant, Councillor Leeper, Councillor Dudas, and Councillor Menard, who have all come to the consultative circle to talk about opportunities in their communities to increase visibility of the host nation. So I appreciate that level of engagement. The update that was provided to committee was absent of one point that has been of ongoing conversation at the circle, and that is the need for better resources for the host nation. So we've developed an action plan of 80 plus items, and at each of these meetings we go over this action plan, and in order for the host nation to do their part, they need support. They need a staff resource. So at last budget, I had put forward a direction for staff to look at how we could provide funding to the host nation to allow for that level of support so that they can continue to implement the plan. And I'm just wondering, because it wasn't in this update, if Mr. Chenier is here today and could provide an update on where we are in terms of funding for the 2026 budget.
Yes, good morning, Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. We did, because this was a separate inquiry from Councillor Bradley a little while back, we did respond by way of a response to the inquiry, saying that we had looked for funding to enable this. We agree that the work that is being asked of the host community over the last 2 years since the cultural circle has started has been way more than anticipated. The original scope of this was to advise staff and council on matters of culture, arts, and heritage and whatnot, but has quickly evolved into a catch-all for many topics that go beyond arts and heritage. And so we're asking a lot. The meetings, the cultural circle meetings, are long, 3 or 4 hours in some cases. And so staff agreed that there is a need to help support the work, and there's perhaps a need for us to look at how we're doing the work and whether the cultural circle is enough or whether we need to provide another format. And as part of our work, we did speak with representatives on the cultural circle to determine what would be required. And from those discussions, we identified that what they are looking for is a full-time position, funding for a full-time position, as well as funding to support the incidentals, travel back and forth to Ottawa, office support, those kinds of things. So we estimate about $100,000. The other thing that was made clear is that they are looking for ongoing funding, so that if they actually hire someone, train them, get them in, that what they need is sustainable funding over a long period of time. And we were not able to find that and secure $100,000 in the 2025 budget. So what we did respond to the inquiry is that we will include this budget requirement as part of the 2026 budget. And I believe I mentioned that at the last cultural circle. So I think in terms of expectations, I think there's a realization that we'll have to go slow on our demands for the rest of this year, and that hopefully as part of budget, we can have a good discussion on that and provide a level of resourcing that they're asking for.
Great, thank you so much. So to all my colleagues who are listening today, just be prepared that will be an ask in the 2026 budget. And I hope that you'll be supportive, because as Mr. Chenier said, those meetings are long and we are asking a lot of our host nation. And in order to continue to make the progress that we want to see with the Civic Cultural Protocol and Implementation Plan, we really do need to provide that level of support. So I'm glad that we had the opportunity today just to mention that again, and look forward to seeing that request in the 2026 budget. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair, and thank you for your work on that, Council. It's appreciated. Seeing no further questions, is this item received? We have 2 notices of motion. Councillor Plant, we'll get the first one up for you, Madame.
Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup. So this is for the renaming of Emont Park to Mary Papatsy Park in Vanier. Mary Papatsy was a beloved member of the Inuit community who lived in Vanier and had a large family who loved her, whereas Mary Papatsy died in Vanier and is counted among the thousands of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Canada, with the circumstances around her death still being unknown, whereas Mary Papatsy lived not far from Emont Park on Emont Street in Vanier, whereas multiple canvassing efforts, social media posts, letter campaigns have overwhelmingly supported the park being named for Mary Papatsy, whereas Rideau Vanier has the largest Inuit population outside of Nunavut, including many NGOs, nonprofit organizations that serve the Inuit community, whereas Rideau Vanier is also the site of National Inuit Day celebrations every year. Therefore, be it resolved that Emont Park in Vanier, located at the corner of Emont Street and Deschamps, be named after Mary Papatsy to honor the Inuit community in Vanier, to honor her life and death, and to honor the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Be it further resolved that Emont Street will keep the same name. Be it further resolved that the cost of changing the park sign to reflect the new name come from Ward 12 Cash and U of Parkland account. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Councillor Plante. That's a notice of motion, so we'll address that in September. We have another notice of motion from you regarding encampment response and analysis.
Right. Whereas the City Council declared an affordable housing and homelessness crisis and emergency at its meeting in January 29, 2020, and where it joined the Solve the Crisis campaign of the Ontario Big City Mayors focused on addressing the homelessness and mental health addictions crisis in Ontario. Whereas one downstream effect of having inadequate resources for addressing homelessness and mental health addictions is the proliferation of encampments. Whereas encampment dismantles are handled by the Unsheltered Task Force, a group chaired by the Community and Social Services Department with the inclusion from OPS, OPH, bylaw, regulatory service, public works, and not-for-profit outreach social services, whereas the number and volume of encampments in Ward 12, particularly in the downtown core, including the Byward Market, Lowertown, and Sandy Hill, has skyrocketed without the proper housing and mental health addictions and prevention support and treatment. Scroll, please. Whereas these encampments can be a public health and safety concern, creating enormous social disorder which impacts the quality of life of the surrounding community, whereas the ongoing impacts of the surrounding community due to the encampments affects the ability of residents to enjoy common spaces, whereas children are acutely impacted by the health and safety concerns resulting from social disorder and encampments which can affect early childhood development, whereas city staff address encampments on a case-by-case basis following standardized approach across the city, whereas timelines established for dismantle through the Unsheltered Task Force are limited by partner agencies' availability, whereas residents have pointed out that there are categories of encampments that should be better triaged based on activities occurring in the encampments, such as where there is criminal activity, whereas having systemic responses to encampments where there is criminal activity should elicit a different response than for those genuinely seeking and needing housing, whereas the distribution of tents is not sanctioned by the city nor organized that the city funds sanctioned to provide tents, whereas encampments can be a public health risk where there is the presence of refuse and human waste both on private and public property, whereas tents can hide nefarious activities committed, whether drug dealing and consuming and sexual assault and harassment, whereas the city procedures for encampment dismantled are based on a standardized response, which is limited by resources available from the city and partner agencies, whereas the city has limited resources to address the surrounding community concerns around encampments, including living with constant aggression and verbal assaults, children who do not have the luxury of moving and seeing their effects on their mental health and well-being compromised and other hazards. Therefore, be it resolved that Community Services Committee recommends that Council direct Community and Social Services Department staff as follows. 1, that staff provide a written summary of the current response to addressing encampments, particularly as it relates to response in Ward 12. And 2, that staff complete an analysis of encampment response, including dismantled by city and ward, and utilize data to identify gaps, which will be used to inform resources, needs, and prioritization by Q4 2025. That following a ward analysis, staff will meet with the impacted ward councillors to discuss findings. Merci beaucoup.
Okay, thank you very much. Those will come forward both in at our September meeting. We do have one inquiry from Councillor Carr.
Thank you very much, Chair. In Food Banks Canada Annual Report 2024, it is reported that Canada has currently experienced the highest levels of food bank use in Canadian history. In response, Food Banks Canada is currently advocating to governments for long-term policies to address the growth of poverty and food insecurity across Canada. They have called on governments to rebuild Canada's broken social safety net, improve affordable housing, and introduce support for workers with low income. The City of Ottawa acknowledges that food insecurity is growing challenge both locally and nationally. In response, the city has taken significant steps to address this issue through its poverty reduction strategy, which was approved by Council in October 2024. A key pillar of this strategy is food security, which prioritizes funding for organizations and initiatives that addresses the root causes of food insecurity and aims to reduce the long-term reliance on emergency food programs. To support this priority, the city has committed the following investments: $1.4 million in project funding for poverty reduction and social development initiatives, $150,000 in strategic investment for local tax clinics to support low-income residents, an additional $462,000 in inflationary increases for over 30 food-serving agencies through the community funding framework, which was a 10% increase over the previous year, $108,000 allocated through the emergency and emergent community need funding to specifically address food insecurity in 2025. In total, the city has invested nearly $5 million in municipal funding toward food security initiatives in 2025. In addition to financial investments, increased advocacy to the provincial government is recognized as a crucial step in addressing systemic issues contributing to food insecurity. Strengthening intergovernmental collaboration is essential to ensure sustainable long-term solutions and adequate support for the local food security efforts. Given the scale of this investment, the importance of addressing food insecurity, and the acknowledgement of Food Banks Canada that advocacy to higher level governments is required to address the root causes of poverty, could staff provide an outline of the city's advocacy efforts to the provincial government regarding food security and poverty reduction? And I just add, if that could be provided by October 31st, it's not urgent. I'd like to have it before that time, though.
And I understand staff are prepared to take it with that time frame.
Yes, we are, Chair.
Thank you. All right, seeing we have no other business, our next meeting is Tuesday, September 23rd, 2025. Are we adjourned?
No.
Have a wonderful.
Thank you.
Cara says no, so we're going to stay here for another 20 minutes. I'm just kidding. Have a wonderful summer, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.